Howdy y'all, welcome back. When discussing the old world, or the world before the year 1900, we often tend to consider the events which transpired in a comparative context to the world we see before us today. It's difficult, admittedly, to adjust our perspective and allow ourselves to understand that prior to the regulation of most things in our day-to-day lives, society was a cornucopia of rapidly growing and changing ideas with very little about our existence being set in stone. The books of history, the definitively formed concepts which would be pushed as the exclusive truth, only became the cornerstone to belief with the rise of public education systems for all. Essentially, when the governments and the kingdoms across our earthly plane realized it was easy to control the narrative when you're the one deciding how it's told. Before the modernization of society, which for this argument we will say occurred after the year 1900, with the final nails in the proverbial coffin coming after the two major world wars, in the 19th century and earlier, when society seemed to still be influenced by experience and word of mouth, as opposed to rules and regulations, we still see a vast belief across the earth in what was deemed to be the supernatural. In particular, we have thousands of years of written accounts of phenomenon occurring in our sky. When the firmament breaks open, the waters rush in. The biblical belief, seemingly a direct one, indicates that our earthly plane was separated from the waters above and the waters below. Essentially, a force field of energy keeps our earth in place and protected from what's outside of this dome. And within this theory, this context, objects entering or exiting our night sky would be profoundly important and significant, as they would have essentially pierced the veil, going against what was believed to be a law of nature put in place by a higher power. Why I state all of this is even through the establishment and enlightenment and the Renaissance period, and even after all the advancement of so-called education, where we deduce the common truths that we all must agree upon today, we simply see that academia was pushing narratives that most people did not agree with. A great example of this is the gigantic bones that were being found in burial mounds throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, occurring mostly in America, but the hearsay from this and from community to community in the newspapers led to excavations of mounds and tells all across the earth. Essentially, we have European settlers beginning to travel west and south out of the original 13 colonies for the first time. Politics aside, when the land was taken from the indigenous people, burial mounds were identified on nearly every corner of America, and quickly stories began to spread of burial mounds, which at the time were initially believed to be naturally occurring hills, but eventually they were accidentally open when new structures or towns were being constructed, and inside of these mounds were being found elaborate burial systems. Sometimes there were entire systems of earthworks, entire systems of tunnels, but furthermore, numerous artifacts were found. Highly expensive precious metals, jewelry of the highest quality, tools, technology, and even what appeared to be certain writing systems depicting a very ancient history. It should come as no surprise then that almost immediately after these discoveries were found and that most of the hills in America tended to have some sort of indigenous past, once this hit the mainstream media in the 19th century, museums were formed in America, with the largest being the Smithsonian, whose sole purpose seemed to be obtaining the findings of these burial mounds and locking them away in archives, really never to be seen again. And I've covered this topic before, but this is roughly the time when we see mainstream academia across the earth begin to try to shape public opinion through somewhat nefarious means. What is often not discussed today is that thousands of burial mounds were excavated in America alone, and in at least 10% of these mounds were discovered larger than average human bones. At the time, we have purported scientists leading in their fields, going to these burial mound excavations and confirming the existence of giant bones. We use the term giant here loosely, but the reports vary. From 7 feet tall is when we begin to see these bones being reported as giant, as the average European settler at this time was under 6 feet tall, but these giants ranged in some published reports up to 20 feet tall. Furthermore, we have at least 24 reports mentioning these giants being founded in the mounds having abnormalities such as protrusions considered to be horns. We have thousands of these reports being published in America during the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries, meaning we should have thousands of giant skeletons in the museums and archives like the Smithsonian, right? The sad answer is no. The subsequent Smithsonian Institute essentially collected these remains for over 100 years, and their lead scientists formulated a theory in the 1930s and the 1940s, basically publishing a report saying that not only did giants not exist in America, but they never existed anywhere in the world. They are not scientifically viable. And this report claimed that the giants founded in the thousands of American mounds were all deemed to be large animal bones, megafauna, which once existed in America, which for some reason the indigenous people buried with their own. And furthermore, the Smithsonian actually had the audacity at this time to burn or destroy or get rid of thousands of giant bones after publishing this report, essentially claiming that since these bones were just animal bones and they couldn't really be determined what sort of animals they could be, they lacked importance and they did not need to be kept in the archives. So from there, the history disappears. This sounds a lot like plausible deniability to me. From roughly the 1940s, really through the advent of the internet, no one ever seemed to question the Smithsonian's finding on giants, even though we quite literally have hundreds of thousands of other people who initially disagreed with what the Smithsonian sought. It was only with the relative ease of research on the internet that a renewed interest has been placed on the giants of old, and we begin to see all of the information, all of the artifacts which these museums really did hide. How essentially academia was discrediting a belief that was widespread simply through hiding evidence that opposed the new belief academia was trying to push. Why do I bring this up? Today, we will look at numerous unidentified objects and events which occurred in the sky throughout Old World history, or the Old World history timeline, or before the year 1900, to begin to address the idea that we may not be alone in the universe. And if we truly entertain the theory that we're under a protective layer or a firmament, then these tales from the old world only heighten our questioning of the realm in which we are forced to exist. Let's begin in the ancient past. Celestial bodies shaped the earliest knowledge of mankind, and nearly every aspect of early human development was impacted by the understanding of the stars, which allowed for proper navigation. Furthermore, the earliest cultures of the world have numerous stories, seemingly in every major culture, of the origin of the stars in the sky. Some claim a battle was fought in the stars between deities. In Babylonia, this was the fall of Tiamat, with Tiamat's destruction forming the basis for the world that we live in today. According to this legend, Tiamat's ribs formed the vault, the firmament, which separated the earth from the heaven above. We have numerous other similar stories claiming of battles in the sky, leading to the foundation of the stars and major constellations. The stars in the sky shaped the original myths which built humanity, so it's understandable why it took millennia for academia to quell the fire which burns in so many humans regarding the origin of our place in this universe. We have one Roman writer who profoundly described the history of Rome in the context of the stars, and the history here is quite fascinating. His name was Julius Obsequens, and very little is known about his life. He was most likely active in the 4th or 5th century AD, and he only has one surviving work. However, this work is one of the most original from Roman times. It was known as the Book of Prodigies, and described the wonders and miracles that had occurred in Rome from roughly 249 BC through 12 BC. We're told Julius's work was most likely derived from an even earlier 1st century AD history of Rome, but what makes this so important is that Julius places much of Rome's success on what was deemed to be supernatural occurrences. While not understood completely at the time, Julius describes the sky raining down with red light, the sun rising briefly in the middle of the night before quickly disappearing, lights of different colors perceived to be ancient deities doing battle in the night sky, and the sun itself being covered by dark black circles, not clouds, which seemingly engulfed all of the sunlight. Furthermore, Julius also described how statues in Rome were thought to truly be alive and contain the essence of deities and fallen heroes. And Julius describes how numerous statues had been found in Rome to be sweating, crying, bleeding, or seemingly adjusting their position. Adding more to the esoteric nature of Julius's writing, and indeed to the esoteric nature of Rome, as discussed in my previous video on the Vatican, early Roman religion was built heavily around the study of humans and animals and their livers after they became the victim of sacrifice. Various ancient cultures of the Near East, such as the Babylonians, also read omens specifically from the liver. However, the practice is believed to have arrived to Rome from the Etruscans. Either way, we have a unique selection of passages here, first-hand accounts describing the lights in the sky which shaped Roman history. Modern scholars now claim Julius was most likely describing events like meteor showers, comets, and sundogs. However, modern fringe theorists believe this is just one of the first confirmable examples of life outside of our earthly plane. While Julius is a solid source, little is known about his life and his importance to Rome, and his theories are often discredited today. However, when we turn to ancient Song China, we find another miraculous set of events which led to the common belief in godlike phenomenon occurring in our sky. Shen Guo was a Chinese polymath, scientist, and leading statesman of the Song Dynasty in China. Shen was considered the master of Chinese mathematics, optics, and the study of timekeeping. Shen was the finance minister, official state inspector, head of the Bureau of Astronomy, and the academic chancellor of China. Throughout his career, Shen pioneered studies in geomorphology, climate patterns, atmospheric refraction, true north, and he also pioneered the use of both the sun as a weapon and early camera obscuras to obtain near photograph quality images. He also designed one of the first raised relief maps, essentially depicting elevation. Shen also founded the fixed position of the pole star, and he corrected dozens of rules in lunar and solar calculations which he discovered to be wrong, and his teachings became commonplace all across the earth. So to say that Shen is a reputable source, as reputable as we may have for this time period, is an understatement. It was in the year 1088 AD that Shen published his Dream Pool Essays. A lengthy passage within goes into great detail of the flying ship which repeatedly visited Chinese villages at night. The ship was metallic in color, had a very large door which opened as the ship hovered above these villages. The ship had a massive, some said opaque object which appeared to be a giant pearl, which would then be energized, and it produced a terribly bright light which was focused and then flashed over these villages. The villagers claim that the ship must have been either extremely high in the air or extremely large, as it cast a shadow of many miles. The report also claimed that the ship could accelerate or decelerate at extreme speeds, and it could change course or directions at will. Shen also reported all of this as factual, and he attempted to decipher the origin and the whereabouts of this advanced piece of technology. That brings us to the concept of missing years, or a phantom timeline, or possibly just the loss of attention to detail. But from roughly 1088 through the early 1500s, we do not have another major mention, at least in a way that has been preserved until today, of any event of questioning happening in the skies over Earth. It's as if the skies simply went quiet. However, in 1561, we have an absolutely astonishing event which was believed to have been witnessed by thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. This event is aptly known as the 1561 celestial event over Nuremberg, which occurred in the city of Nuremberg, Germany, at that time a free imperial city of the Holy Roman Empire. The narrative here is absolutely bonkers. We're told at sunrise on April 14th, 1561, the entirety of Nuremberg was woken up to the sounds of battle occurring in the sky overhead. It appeared that at least one of the combatants was a group of spheres that were quite literally descending from the sun into our atmosphere. Furthermore, some of these spheres were said to be in the shape of a cross, with the sphere appearing to be the vehicle for travel. As these spheres appeared in the sky, some attached to form even larger structures. According to this legend, crescent-shaped portals appeared following the initial spheres, releasing their own second wave of spheres of a different shape and color. These spheres appeared to be doing battle with each other in the sky, and as the battle continued, the people of Nuremberg feared for their lives. As the battle concluded, a giant black triangular structure was said to have appeared over the entire city and completely blocked out the sun. It was at this time that the spheres began to fall out of the sky. However, none of the spheres actually made it to Earth, as they were said to have disintegrated before they reached the ground. If that doesn't sound ridiculous, I don't know what does. The people of Nuremberg universally agreed that this was an unexplainable event that was sent by God, and we have zero scientific reports at the time of the event even attempting to try to explain what had occurred. The event was only readdressed in 1958 when it was rediscovered and shared with the public by Carl Jung. This could be considered a one-off event or a single phenomenon, except it happened again just 5 years later, also in Europe, in the city of Basel, Switzerland. It was in the city of Basel in 1566 that on 3 separate occasions, massive red and black spheres descended upon the city's skyline. We also have multiple leaflets or documents from this time that have survived until today, making this experience in Basel even more unexplainable. First, on July 27th of 1566, the sunset in Basel was especially red, followed by black spheres, and the sun appeared to shrink in size rather than set. As the sun shrunk, the sky around the sun grew into a dark crimson red, and the sun itself appeared to give off a different color light. Not direct sunlight, but something more dark and red in hue. On July 28th, 1566, the next evening, after a seemingly normal day, the sun in Basel again turned crimson red around sunset, producing a cold red light and seemingly shrinking in the night sky, not setting. This red light was considered to be even more intense, with a more significant drop in temperature than the night before, and it caused many to evacuate the city of Basel. However, for roughly 10 days after this event, things seemingly returned to normal in Basel. However, at dawn on August 7th of 1566, the sun rose bright red like the color of the sun on the nights before. But this time, the sun was close. It was rising. It was not shrinking. It appeared to be growing. Within moments of the sun first rising on August 7th, it engulfed Basel in crimson light, and this event was followed by numerous hundreds of red and black spheres which appeared to blot out the sun. In this legend, the spheres chattered as if they were speaking, what may be seen as the operation of motors or the use of energy, and within moments, these spheres all turned to a bright orange color and then crashed to the earth. At this time, the sun returned to its usual temperature and status, and nothing like this ever occurred again in Basel. The Basel event was considered to be the most well-known sky spectacle or miracle in Europe during the 16th century and was never explained by science. It was simply swept under the rug or considered to be simply a miracle. Which brings me to the last major event in the skies before the turn of the century into the 1900s. This old world event actually occurred in the New World, and the history here, which I've covered briefly before, is a cascading stream that is filled with nonsense. We're told from 1896 through 1897 and into 1898, all throughout America, were sightings of a massive airship or group of airships which visited America's largest cities late at night, shining a massive light from above before disappearing into the night sky. These stories were greatly sensationalized throughout America and became the foundations for many major news outlets to achieve their initial fame. Reports of the alleged crewmen and pilots usually described them as humanoid, although sometimes the crew were claimed to have opened the doors of the airship and spoke to those below, claiming to be extraterrestrial in origin. Oddly, we're told one-off airships, like those by Solomon Thomas, the whole way back in 1863 may have actually had the capabilities described in these reports from over 30 years later, but most of the original cutting-edge airships were never patented. The first major reports stemmed from the West Coast in 1896, followed by reports all across America beginning in early 1897. Many people even reported talking to the pilots and claiming the ship was created by Thomas Edison as a form of artificial star that he could use to discreetly fly across the country. Edison actually even went as far as publicly addressing these claims in a letter on April 16th of 1897, where he claimed he did not have the ability to construct such a feat of engineering and that the reports of such a ship are most likely exaggerations. After Edison's comments became major news fodder, attention on these mysterious airships, especially on unidentified flying objects, almost ceased to exist immediately, and the concept of UFOs goes cold until after the Second World War.